Welcome to the second episode of Kabbalistic Mystic, the podcast for Western seekers from all walks of life, in which we focus on the ancient Hebrew wisdom as the lost spiritual heritage of the West. I'm Batat, your host, and in this episode we'll talk about the history and background behind the ancient Hebrew wisdom. How does it relate to other spiritual and religious frameworks in the West? And we're going to do that by talking about the spiritual principles behind the Tree of Life and the ancient Hebrew letters. Let's begin. I recently gave a talk titled Introduction to the Tree of Life, the Lost Ancient Tradition of the West. And during that talk, it was brought to my attention that some of the people in the audience felt uncomfortable, even guilty, just sitting and listening to me describing the Tree of Life, simply because of their own spiritual beliefs. Now, I can understand that we all come from different traditions. Our identity is formed and forged by our beliefs, traditions, and education. I myself have struggled with my spiritual identity for quite a while before I found my path, and I still struggle finding the line between the Jewish heritage in which I grew up and the Hebrew wisdom which I study and teach. So if you're one of those people, a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, an atheist, and you feel that by simply listening to this podcast, you're walking a fine line, when it comes to your beliefs, I would like to start by congratulating you. It takes courage to explore areas outside of our traditional beliefs, but by simply showing up and expanding our knowledge, we're bridging the gaps that are dividing us as a single species. So I have a request. If what I say resonate with you, great, keep listening. If it does not resonate with you, it wasn't meant for you. I offer no dogma. All I can share is my own limited understanding, experience, accumulated knowledge. What I can tell you, however, from my own experience of evaluating the knowledge of the Tree of Life in the light of other spiritual frameworks and religious traditions, is that it does not contradict with the pure essence of any of these methodologies. In fact, I found the Tree of Life and the knowledge hidden in the Hebrew letters to complement, elaborate, accentuate other traditions, both from the East and the West. Let it be Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam. The test for what is true is that it's always true. Truth can be sometimes subjective, but the subjectivity always relies on our attitude and openness, as well as the willingness to enter a discussion with a beginner's mind. Following that talk I recently gave, I realized that it would be beneficial for me to discuss the spiritual principles behind the Tree of Life as a part of this podcast series. And it would allow you, the listener, to determine for yourself if those principles resonate with your own. I also realized that it would probably be a good idea to take time to share the scope of this knowledge and its distinction from other spiritual or religious frameworks. And that's going to be today's topic. So at some point during that talk, someone raised their hand and asked a question, which caught me a bit off guard. The question was, what is Kabbalah? And I realized in that moment that, like anyone who is immersed in a subject matter since childhood, I take my familiarity with some terms related to Judaism and Hebrew mysticism for granted and unconsciously assume that everybody knows what they mean. So please, if I mention any term that you are unfamiliar with, please do not hesitate to ask me about it. So let's start by briefly talking about Kabbalah and why I chose the name Kabbalistic Mystic for this podcast series. Kabbalah in Hebrew means to receive. I'm using it in the context of this show to describe the ancient spiritual knowledge that was received by many wise men and women, either orally from their parents or teachers or via meditation. They received it somehow through generations and generations of spiritual practices surrounding the hidden meaning of the Hebrew letters. And the focus of this knowledge is the meaning of the tree of life as a cosmic map of creation, like we've discussed in the previous episode, as well as a template for the archetypal human mind and a map for the development of the collective and individual consciousness of our species. Now, in Judaism, the term Kabbalah is used to describe one of the four main pillars of knowledge or law, collectively called Torah, with Kabbalah being the pillars that holds the secret portion of the Jewish tradition. It is a collective name for the books that contain information about the tree of life, the afterlife, how the universe came to existence, advanced spiritual rituals, and much, much more. Now, naturally, I study these Jewish texts along many other occultist and mystic texts. And there's two Jewish books of Kabbalah that are worthy of mentioning here. The first and most known is the one called the Zohar, and it's an eclectic collection of stories and verbal accounts of events that took place around in the second century, mainly quoting a man named Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and the rabbis he hung out with during that time. And he and his son Eliezer escaped the Romans and were hiding in a cave for 14 years. And he was told that they received, or in Hebrew, kiblu, a lot of divine secret information during meditation, which I'm guessing is the only thing that you can really do in a cave for 14 years. So the Zohar appeared in the 13th century with the knowledge passed verbally until then to protect it from persecutions. It is written mostly in Aramaic and is deeply symbolic, leaving much room for interpretation and question. It's a really eclectic collection of various stories. It's kind of messy. Now, the other important Jewish Kabbalah book is one that I mentioned during the first episode of this podcast, and it's called The Book of Formation. And it's a short book, a short text, should I say. It's not really a book. It's about 1,200 to 2,500 words, depends on the version, since, like the Zohar, it was passed verbally for hundreds of years, and some say thousands even, before it was really and finally captured on paper. So it's told that the Book of Formation was written by Abraham himself, but some, including language experts, attribute the book to the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, so about the same time that the material of the Zohar was received. Either or, it's the most detailed account of the Tree of Life and the Hebrew letters as a template of the cosmic creation. It's very cryptic. I sort of like to reference it as essential oil. Every word, every sentence that you read holds and hides so much. However, I found that the Book of Formation comes to glorious life in the light of various other mystical and occultist knowledge, especially outside of traditional Jewish texts. Now, part of this podcast, I'll naturally quote and use some Jewish texts, but it's important to mention that this podcast is not focusing on the Jewish faith or the traditional Jewish methodology as it pertains to the Tree of Life. As we mentioned, Kabbalah means to receive. So we're using the term Kabbalistic Mystic to describe the lost spiritual knowledge of the West that has been received by many wise teachers, some Jewish, some Christian, some pagan, many other occultists and mystics, all sharing one thing in common, the belief that the Tree of Life and the Hebrew letters describe the mechanism behind the cosmic creation, as well as some kind of a path for human consciousness, evolution, and enlightenment. This podcast series draws upon knowledge from hundreds of teachers from the East and the West, some modern, some ancient. I'll most likely be quoting the Hebrew Bible, the New Testament, the Buddha, Prophet Muhammad, any spiritual teacher that even exists and alive in our time that I will find relevant. So this is because the Tree of Life, as a cosmic template of the entire universe, and each of its parts can be considered and viewed as a template for all spiritual, mental, and physical disciplines. So let's talk history for just one moment. The earliest account of this knowledge dates to the Mesopotamian period around 2000 BC. It's believed that Abraham received the secret knowledge of the Hebrew letters from Nebuchadnezzar, which was the king of Salem, which was the early name for Jerusalem. The Tarot Major Arcana, which is a visual account of the 22 images corresponding to the Hebrew letters and depicting the same hidden knowledge, were found in ancient Egypt before the time the Israelites were enslaved, around 1450 BC. And some believe that the knowledge was brought down by Joseph, the great-grandson of Abraham, who was sold to the Egyptian as a slave. Some believe that the tarot was delivered by Ra, the Egyptian god. So we'll come back to tarot in some detail in subsequent episodes. It's very important to talk about tarot. It's a major component of Hebrew mysticism. So as you can see, the wisdom of the Hebrew letters predates all major religions. The Tree of Life is a framework that belongs to all humanity, delivered to us beyond space and time as we know it. It does not contradict any religion, nor does it tell us how to act or what to do. It simply describes a set of principles, laws, stages of human consciousness evolution that pertains to us as a species. It does not claim for anything to be good or bad. It just is. It can be viewed as the seed of all Western religions. And as you'll see through the future episodes of this podcast, it also reflects the basic concept described by all Eastern methodologies. In other words, the Tree of Life and the Hebrew letters are the lost spiritual tradition of the West. It is my mission to help those who wish to reclaim it as their own, regardless of their spiritual, religious, or even secular practices and beliefs. That's why I'm here. That's why I've decided to do this podcast. So let's name some of the central spiritual principles behind the Tree of Life. I chose 3 that I believe are the Holy Trinity, no pun intended, since they're the fundamental concept from which all other ideas and practices emanate. And the first one starts with a blanket.
Okay, let's get started.
Part of my investigation?
Yes. Say this blanket represents all the matter and energy in the universe, okay? You, me, everything. Nothing has been left out, all right? All the particles, everything.
What's outside this blanket?
More blankets, that's the point.
Blanket's everything.
Exactly. This is everything, okay? Let's just say that this is me, right? And I'm, 60-odd years old, and I'm wearing a gray suit, blah, blah, blah. And let's say over here, this is you, and you're, I don't know, you're 21, you've got dark hair, etc. And over here, this is Vivian, my wife and colleague. And then over here, this is the Eiffel Tower, right? It's Paris. And this is a war. And this is a museum. And this is a disease. And this is an orgasm. And this is a hamburger.
Everything is the same, even if it's different.
Exactly. But our everyday mind forgets this. We think everything is separate, limited. I'm over here, you're over there, which is true. But it's not the whole truth, because we're all connected. Because we are connected.
That was Dustin Hoffman explaining the idea of the blanket to Jason Schwartzman in I Heart Huckabees. I love this movie. If you haven't seen it, please do. It's fun and funny. Now, that's the first principle of the Tree of Life. We're all connected. Better yet, we're all one. There is only one entity experiencing itself through us. Some of us encountered elevated states of consciousness. Perhaps you have encountered it in meditation or even under the influence of altering substances such as ayahuasca, the sacred tea, or psilocybin mushrooms, in which we're actually experience this true nature of reality, that we're all one, we're all connected. But in day-to-day life, we are cloaked by a heavy veil of separateness, which is important for us to have, because if we wouldn't have it, we wouldn't be able to experience life, to animate life in our own unique way. For us to relate to ourselves subjectively, we must have an objective reality we can separate ourselves from. At this day and age, the idea of oneness is more and more backed up by science. Einstein taught us that even time and space are the same thing, forming a single continuous reality separated only by our perception. Brian Greene's book, The Elegant Universe, explains how string theory shows us that everything that happens in the universe arises from vibration of one single entity. In other words, the entire universe emanates from one point, one source of light manifesting as matter, distinguishing itself only by the unique pattern of vibration. We spoke about that a little bit in the previous episode. Philosophers tell us the same thing. Here's Alan Watts explaining the same idea.
We have been educated to use our minds in a certain way, a way that ignores or screens out the fact that every one of us is an aperture through which the whole cosmos looks out. You see, it's as if you had a light covered with a black ball, and in this ball were pinholes, and each pinhole is an aperture through which the light comes out. So in that way, every one of us is actually a pinhole through which the fundamental light, that is the existence itself, looks out. Only the game we're playing is not to know this.
That was Alan Watts, the philosopher. The Zohar, which we mentioned earlier is the main book of Jewish Kabbalistic knowledge, tells us something very similar. Here's what it sounds like in Aramaic. תא הזה מחשבה ראשיתה דקולה ובגין דהי מחשבה איגי לגו סתימה ולא התיידע. וכד תסתכל בדרגין הוא מחשבה הוא בינה הוא קול הוא דיבור וכול אחד והיא מחשבה ראשיתה דקולה ולא הווה פירוד אלא כל אחד וקישורה אחד דהי הוא מחשבה ממש התקשר בעין ולא התפשר להלמין ודהו אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. And for those of you who wish to find this was a quote from the Zohar, Bereshit Rav Mem Zayin Amud Bet. Now what it says is that if you look at the Sfirot in the Tree of Life, you realize that thought, understanding, sound, speech is all originating from the same thing, one original thought brought into existence by the Creator itself. In other words, the entire universe is being thought into existence by the Creator, like Googles and Googles of simultaneously experienced streams of consciousness. A bee, a planet, a flower, a black hole, you, me, the sound that you're hearing right now, Brad Pitt, Donald Trump, the microphone I'm talking to, everything is alive. Everything is a part of a thought experienced by the Creator itself in an infinitely complex matrix of space and time. This is the meaning, the Zohar says, of the famous Jewish prayer, Adonai Echad Ushmo Echad. Adonai is God. God is one, and the Word is one. Now, the idea that you and I are the Creator experiencing itself might not be palatable to many of us, especially if we're traditional Christian, Jew, Muslim, growing up in an Orthodox Jewish family. It's something that I deeply understand and respect. But what if we just hold the idea that we're all created in the same image and somehow connected to each other? No need to understand exactly how. No need to decide that we understand. What would be the practical implementation of this abstract spiritual principle? What does it mean to us here and now in this reality of separateness? After all, when one of us dies, the other one lives, right? We have different views, different perspectives, different financial reality. We have different lives. We speak different languages, act according to different social, cultural, traditional, and of course, spiritual patterns of behavior. So how is it principle that we're all connected relevant to us in our day-to-day lives? And how can we hold it in a way that can coexist with our religious and spiritual beliefs, regardless of what they are? Well, here's one way to answer that question by yet another spiritual master.
It's energy. Surrounds us and binds us. luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the force around you. Here, between you, me, the tree, the rock, everywhere.
That was Yoda in Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. We can think about it as leaves in a tree. Just like all leaves within a tree share the same root system, but each leaf lives and dies separately in its own season, so is the trunk of our mind connected to the collective consciousness of all humans. But if one leaf is infected by a deadly worm, the entire tree is in danger. Same goes for all humanity. When something bad happens to someone, even in different continent, it really happens to us all, not directly, but indirectly. Eventually, we will feel the consequences. We are all connected. This is the basis of the chaos theory, right? A flutter of a wing of a butterfly in Asia can cause rain in the United States. Not only we're all built in the same image, sharing the same cosmic template of existence, bound by the same laws of nature, share the same emotions, but furthermore, there is a thread that connects us all to each other, like one big blanket. We're a part of the same system, the same mechanism. As such, we have an intrinsic sense of responsibility for the well-being, safety, happiness of one another. It does not mean that we all have to become activists or spend our lives helping starving kids in Africa. We all have different journeys and must follow our deepest desire without guilt or inner judgment. But it does mean that we're better off as a species if we cultivate a sense of caring and responsibility towards our fellow man, woman, and animal, plant life, as well as the planet itself, the trunk and roots of our tree. Even if just in the general attitude towards life, the living, the environment that is surrounding us, we are all connected. That is the first spiritual principle that the Tree of Life represents. Let's move on to the second one. Love, the most discussed topic in the universe. What more can I really say about love? Let's take a moment to understand what love is according to the Tree of Life. In the first episode of this show, we talked about the two building blocks of the universe, light and consciousness. And light manifests itself as matter by various patterns and speed of vibration. And consciousness is the way with which we perceive it. And that's processed by our minds and our senses. According to the Tree of Life, pure light, which is perceived unfiltered and unaltered, is experienced by our consciousness as pure love. That is, we experience an array of emotion and physical sensations at any given time. They're all really a derivative of this pure light. They're not complete. They're only one color in a big palette. But when we experience unconditional love, we experience light in its purity. And this is not the kind of love that hurts. It's rather the kind of love that is so overwhelmingly blissful that no other emotion or perception can be experienced in the same moment. Everything disappears. Some of us may have been lucky to experience it in our lives in, maybe some special moments, such as maybe we held our first newborn or as a part of a spiritual awakening. Our hearts are open, literally and figuratively. All shields are down. We are capable of doing everything in those moments. Some actually sense an energetic sensation in the heart chakra. Some don't. Fear, shame, anger, grief, they're all gone. We feel as if light is literally beaming out of our eyes, forcing us to smile, laugh, even cry with joy. The only awareness that is experienced in those moments is unconditional outpouring of pure love towards all beings. Now, occultism and Kabbalah, as well as tarot, which all three are really one and the same, this consciousness is called white light. It's the essence of the tiny spark of cosmic energy which we receive from the universe, pure love. It's represented in Hebrew wisdom by the letter Yod, which is the smallest letter of them all. But it's the most important one, as you can find it in various shapes and form in every other letter. Once this white light enters our astral body, it's filtered by a set of lenses, as well as impacted by some external cosmic forces, and that results in us rarely staying in that state of blissful consciousness. Now, achieving a state of permanent enlightenment or illumination means that we've purified those lenses and learned how to control the response to these external forces I mentioned. And that results in the embodiment of this state of consciousness of pure love at any given moment. That is, we only feel love towards any other living being, let it be a friend or a foe. So what are these lenses that abstract the white light and cause it to break like a prism into the diverse palette of human behavior and emotional response we're familiar with? On a day-to-day basis, it's not what we experience. We don't experience unconditional love at any given moment towards any being. These lenses, there's 12 of them, are represented on the Tree of Life at the set of 12 diagonal lines. They correspond to the 12 specific Hebrew letters called the simple letters, and to 12 Hebrew month of the year, 12 specific organs in the body, and this might be a more familiar concept, to the 12 zodiac signs. So you see, ancient wisdom tells us that we are a macrocosm of the entire universe. Each and every one of us contains the entire range of the zodiac, regardless of our sun sign. Modern use of astrology is not doing justice to these ancient signs. In reality, the 12 zodiac signs represent 12 extreme states of consciousness that each and every one of us is capable of embodying under very specific circumstances. Just like a color palette, these extreme states of consciousness generate an infinite number of behavioral characteristics, which in turn account for the wide range of human expression. Astrology is very important in Hebrew mysticism. It's described in the Book of Formation. Now, why 12? Because everything in the universe is built in the same image. These 12 lenses correspond to the musical scale. Think about a piano keyboard. There's 7 white keys and 5 black ones, giving us the entire octave. Same goes for the 7 colors of the rainbow. Aries, for example, represents red. Gemini represents orange, and Taurus, which is right in between, represents red-orange, as well as C sharp, which is between C natural and D natural on the musical scale. So by looking at these 12 lenses and the Hebrew letters, we can start seeing the grand design in the cosmos. Light is our essence. It's what we're made of in terms of matter. Now, from a consciousness perspective, we're made of love. And we're all moving slowly, whether we're conscious of it or not, whether we want it or not, towards harmonizing our own color palette into white light, manifested as the conscious understanding that love is the answer to every problem we face. True, some events throw us backwards. Someone close to us dies and breaks our hearts, causing us to close our hearts in order to protect it from experiencing additional pain. Someone hurts us badly and causes us to feel vengeful and mean. These are all temporary phases. From a bird's eye view, the progress across the various incarnations is unstoppable. The trajectory is set. All we have to do is pay attention. Pay attention to our thoughts, emotions, speech, to become self-aware. How do we react? What do we feel? What do we say? The universe does the rest. So to summarize the second principle of the Tree of Life, We can say that our true nature is unconditional love, and that's what we're going towards. As spiritual seekers, we seek to find the path towards infusing that love into every scenario, regardless of the flavor of the emotional response we might be also experiencing. This is the only way out of life's suffering. This idea is not really new to anyone who was exposed to any spiritual or religious frameworks, and even atheist frameworks in some capacities. Maybe you're a Muslim. You'll never enter paradise until you have faith, and you have not completed your faith until you love one another. That's Prophet Muhammad. He's also quote saying, love for your brother what you love for yourself. Or maybe you're a Christian. This is my commandment, said Jesus, that you love another as I have loved you. Judaism is no different. There's a story in Jewish tradition about a man who came before a famous rabbi named Hillel and said, I want you to teach me the entire Jewish law while I stand on one foot. And the rabbi said, what you hate, do not do to your friends. That's the entire law. Everything else is an interpretation. Now it says in the Hebrew Bible, Ve'ahavta l're'acha kamocha, which translates to love your friends as you love yourself. It's very familiar to the quote by Jesus in Mark 12:31, you should love your neighbor as yourself. The interesting piece about this Hebrew quote, Ve'ahavta l're'acha kamocha, is the choice of word friend. There's other ways to say friend in Hebrew, more common ones instead of re'acha, but the one used is coming from the same root as the word evil, ra, bad. So the choice of word, re'acha, in this phrase was to say you should love even those that wish you harm. It's the same type of love that we see in the Bhagavad Gita, the ancient Hindu Sanskrit scripture that tells us the story of Arjuna, who goes to fight beloved members of his extended family on the battlefield. It is the purpose of the Tree of Life as a map of human consciousness evolution to guide us towards finding and experiencing this love in every moment, regardless of circumstances that surround us. For everything to function, there must be a mechanism. Daphne Moore said that. The human psyche is no different. By studying the Tree of Life, we can get familiar with the forces that prevent us from experiencing and expressing our true nature and living to our real potential. And we can start to see the various behavior patterns we have cultivated since childhood, our personality, and consequently to start changing them. There is love in every moment. Seek and you shall find. The third and last spiritual principle that I will name in the context of this episode is the concept of free will. It's also called the law of confusion. The idea is that we incarnate into this life with a thick veil of forgetfulness. It's a veil of mystery that separates us from our true nature, of who we really truly are, unconditional love. It's a veil between our conscious existence, the self-conscious mind, represented in the tarot by the emperor, and the subconscious, the all-knowing intuitive mind, represented by the empress. And the veil is there for a reason, and the reason is choice. Without it, we wouldn't have the ability to choose. We'll have nothing that drives us towards guiding ourselves towards the truth. And this is why our subconscious, as well as being from beyond this plane of existence, cannot communicate with us directly, but instead do it metaphorically and symbolically through dreams and snippets of intuitive hints and serendipitousness in our lives. Because you see, proof contradicts faith. There are not too many sane people around who don't believe in gravity, right? I mean, it's proven itself to exist pretty much from the first fall we took as infants, trying to stand on our feet. And so having a proof for the existence of reality beyond the veil of forgetfulness, that is, the reality that awaits us after death, would eliminate the need to believe that there's more to life than what we see. Simply put, faith is critical for the game of life to have any meaning. It allows us to be a part of life with all the challenges, difficulties, frustrations, and moments of joy. It allows us to show up. It allows us to still choose who we want to be at any given moment. This spiritual principle is key, and it's the first and most important law of our existence. It is the foundation for the law of karma, since karma is basically energy that we accumulate in our debt when we infringe on the free will of others. The concept of free will and our need to cultivate a behavior which respects the free will of all living creatures is the very ground on which the game of life stands. You can have it as a firm ground, trusted to provide us with a solid footing on the journey, or as shaky, treacherous ground as quicksand. It is our choice. The concept of free will is very simple, can be very complex too, and emotionally challenging to implement in full. It's well summed with the words of Friedrich Nietzsche: "You have your way, I have mine. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it does not exist." Nietzsche is trying to tell us that in reality, there's no right and wrong, no good and bad. There is only what we do. And then, of course, there's a law of karma. When you do something that infringes on somebody's free will, say, for example, you steal from them or cheat them, you force them into a situation that otherwise they wouldn't choose. You have just accumulated energy in your debt. It's like a stone that you throw upwards into the sky. It's bound to come back and hit you. If not this lifetime, then the next. This way or another, it's not going to go anywhere. We'll talk more about karma and how to eradicate accumulated cosmic debt in future episodes. At this point, I want to focus on the principle of free will itself. We can and do infringe on the free will of others just by living our lives. I mean, it's a reality. It's unavoidable. The key here is intention, awareness. That is attention and forgiveness to ourselves and others. Now, the ultimate infringement of someone's free will is to end their lives. That's why killing someone is a horrible, horrible thing. It makes you think of capital punishment. Who is carrying this karmic, horrible death? We're all here for a reason. We have done what we've done for a reason. And we're here to live our lives, live our story in full, to play our role in the chaos of events without seeing the beautiful intelligence that is weaved into it, that guides it. Who's to say what good someone who did awful things could still do, having the chance to repent and pay his or her debt to society? The only justification we have to infringe on someone's free will, or even to kill, is that if otherwise, they will infringe on others. That is, if someone comes to kill us, I can defend myself and kill him first. But that's, we all know, have been interpreted and expanded very much through history. In any case that we infringe somebody's free will knowingly and consciously, we must be very, very careful in understanding where the line is. It's often a very thin gray line, and we must practice continuously in detecting it in the sand. Respecting the free will of others means that it's not up to us to determine how and when others are going to live their lives. Judge not, and ye shall not be judged. We have the ability to think for ourselves, our common sense, and better yet, we have our intuition. And when we're tuned to it, it tells us when we're infringing on someone's free will. The more we practice, the more we learn what to avoid and how to avoid this pitfall. I used to say to people, you should do this, you should do that. Many of my friends and family, I said it because I cared about them. But to truly allow people to choose their path, we are better off silent until we ask for help. There's this quote by Edward E. Purrington. He said, "The best way to make someone your enemy is to give them a friendly advice." I love this quote. You have to love people for who they are. You have to let them do what they do. You You have to help them only when you're asked. And even then, we're better off doing it gently and by sharing our own journey. They'll pick it up. They'll pick up whatever they need to pick up. Scaring someone from walking a path they intend to walk because of our own past experience might prevent them from having a different lesson or learning a valuable lesson themselves. And at the same time, we don't want to watch our friends walking into a trap or a dangerous situation. And this is why I mentioned before that it can get tricky. Infringing on someone's free will is sometimes obvious when we use force and when we do to others something we don't want to be done to us, but it's not so obvious when we're acting out of love. Now, intention matters, no doubt. At the same time, cultivating awareness of the concept of free will can help us in our spiritual journey. There are specific cases where we are supposed to limit the free will of others, specifically when people are incapable of taking care of themselves, such as when they're very young, starting their lives, or when they're very old and disabled. The responsibility then falls on us to put ourselves in their shoes and ask what would be the right balance of freedom and limitation for that person. What would serve them best? The concept of free will can be used as a rule of thumb for our daily behavior. I want to emphasize that I do believe that civil law is important. Not everyone is as tuned, shall we say, to the intuitive dial of the conscious values. Law is important because it assists us as civilization towards a society where social values are cultivated. In such a society, less and less laws might be needed because we can use our common sense and our intuition. For now, the lack of these laws would mean chaos. But the topic of discussion here is our spiritual values. And when it comes to our spiritual journey, the Tree of Life has one advice and one only: to focus on ourselves. We cannot save anyone else but ourselves. We cannot know what is good for anyone else until we fully walked in their shoes, which is obviously never possible to the full extent. And so all religious rules, that is dogma, fall short in securing the God-given right of all humans to choose for themselves. It's a loaded subject, I know. What about values, morals? Who decides what should translate to civil law and what should not? I'm not here to provide answers. The debate will continue. All I can tell you is that in this context, while filtering out my own opinions and beliefs, the Tree of Life shows us that we can only work on ourselves. We can only heal ourselves. We can only save ourselves. We can love others only by letting them walk their own journey. That is often a very painful thing to do, especially if they're suffering over when they do contradict our values. But when it comes to this spiritual principle behind the Tree of Life, respecting the choices of others is the only way to ensure we do not infringe on their free will and prevent ourselves from accumulating cosmic, karmic debt. It also means that we'll be moving along more seamlessly on our own spiritual journey. This is because acceptance of others cultivates unconditional love, which is our true nature towards which we are all moving. So by now, you hopefully have a pretty good idea of what spiritual principles the Tree of Life stands for, and you have the ability to discern for yourself if these ideas are ones you can resonate, align with. We spoke of 3 principles. The first one was that we're all somehow connected, sharing responsibility, accountability for the well-being of another, as well as the environment in which we live in, the root of our tree. The second one was that unconditional love is the ultimate expression of our true essence. It's who we are. It's the very expressive nature of the cosmic energy that we are animated by, and the manifestation we strive for and seek in our spiritual journey as self-conscious humans. And the last one was free will and the law of confusion, a key principle that guarantees that we'll be able to choose for ourselves at any given moment, and ensures the validity and power of our faith in whatever you choose to believe. Even if you're an atheist, free wills allow you to do that, to choose that at any given moment. It's the birthright of all humans, and we must be very careful not to infringe upon it when we go about our business in the world. This starts with eliminating judgment and cultivating acceptance. There are many other principles behind the tree of life, but I chose to focus on the spiritual ones so you can align the tree of life or not with your own set of values and principles. The other principles, such as the law of duality, the concept of sexual energy, the law of equilibrium, the law of reversal, cycles, they're all important, but they fall more into different categories. They're all a part of the mechanism by which consciousness operates rather than the spiritual concepts to which it serves. And we'll discuss many of those and the ones we mentioned today in more detail as we dive into the structure of the tree of life and the secrets behind the Hebrew letters. This concludes the second episode of Kabbalistic Mystic. You heard snippets of music today by Moksha. You heard fair use clips by Alan Watts, the Beatles, and from I Heart Huckabees, as well as Star Wars. I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. For a detailed list of various references mentioned in this episode, you can check out the show notes at kabbalisticmystic.com. You can support the show by sharing, rating, and providing feedback. Reviews on iTunes are always appreciated. There's instructions and other links on www.kabbalisticmystic.com. I also want to thank you for bearing with my voice today. It's spring here when I'm recording this episode, and the pollen is preventing me from breathing freely. So thank you for bearing with me today. I am Ovadia Batat from Spokane, Washington, wishing you health, happiness, and well-being. May you find love in every moment.